Blueprint. Not to be confused with Blueprints, the really popular indie game that I thought was called Blueprints, Prints, and I searched for it and I almost bought this game until I realized that that is not how it's spelled and it's a planned word. Anyway, that's a really fun game, but that has nothing to do with this video. Blueprint, spelled Blueprint, is the prompt for today's episode of Junktober. Here's the current state of our board, and I think that I need to plan out where the buildings and really important bits are going to be sooner rather than later. A blueprint of sorts. But my thinking for blueprint is to grab a bit of this cheap foam. This foam board is from Amazon. It is so cheap. It is just foam. There is no paper on either side. I know people talk a lot about the foam board from the dollar store. I believe the brand is Ready Board, and it is really good. You peel off the paper and you can carve into it and stuff. I like this stuff a lot too. There is no paper, it's just foam. It's very lightweight, it's really easy to cut, and I'm gonna use it to plan out the main bits of this build so that I know roughly how big they need to be and where they're gonna be and things like that. And if you recall, I made this plan. I know that I want to have a big mausoleum up here. This stage is for making sure it all fits and putting the final details on that plan. So let's get started. First, I just want to figure out the general dimensions of the mausoleum. Okay, 7 centimeters seems about right. And yes, I do all of my builds like this. I just prefer creating very freeform. I like planning when it's more of like a brainstorming, what are the possibilities type of planning. I don't really like planning when it comes down to specific measurements way ahead of time and conforming to that. I like freeform organic building. This is the way I'm gonna do it. There is actually slightly a reason why I chose 7 centimeters because that was actually a tiny bit smaller than the overall footprint I want for the mausoleum. I need to make sure that there is enough space in the construction of the building to put little stone and things that are gonna make that footprint a little bit bigger. Making sure the size is Colonel Mustard approved. If you don't know what the deal is with Colonel Mustard is my bud. I like him, he makes me laugh. So I kind of use him as a guide on how big things need to be. 6 centimeters for the height. I feel like I should let some natural light in. There we go. Yeah, this is gonna be really tight. This is why this is important. I wanted a tree here and a fountain and gravestones and a fence around the whole thing. That is okay. I just need to make sure that it's not so tight that I can't fit everything I want to fit. Okay, I finished up the basic shapes. I've got my 2 main walls here, my side walls. My measurements were kind of dumb. I didn't account for the width of the foam board, so this is actually more or less going to be a square. I just had a genius idea. I don't even have to recut it. But if I just switch the sides, there we go. I switched the sides up, it's more of a rectangle. That's the exact shape I was looking for. Okay, done. So now I'm just gonna take all these pieces and add a ton more detail. Hey there, I am mid-cutting these XPS foam strips for the mausoleum. And I'm just realizing that I'm getting ahead of myself. This episode for the prompt blueprint was supposed to just be planning out the position of the mausoleum and the other bits. So I'm gonna roll it back and continue planning, and then in a future video, maybe not tomorrow, but in a couple days, you will see me adding more detail to this mausoleum. Anyway, back to planning the blueprint of the graveyard. This version of the mausoleum, which is good enough for now, I'm gonna put that here, and I'm also gonna need that center part for the tree. So I think this is a close enough circle size, making a blueprint, if you will. And I'm gonna cut out that shape. I'm gonna cut a little bit on the inner edge. I say this at least once a video, but this also doesn't have to be perfect. not only because it just doesn't, this isn't life or death, but also because my style and this theme and aesthetic is a little grungy, dirty, ramshackle, dilapidated. I think these things look better when they're a little off. So I've got the placement for the tree, placement for the mausoleum. I also need to blueprint out the fence posts. I should leave about like this much width. So I'm gonna cut like 1.5 centimeter strip just to use as a guide for the fencing. I'm not even gonna bother cutting out like a bunch of strips to put along the edge or anything like that. I'm simply going to use this as a guide for when I'm gluing in other elements. So that way I know not to get too close to this edge. So now if I go to glue in like some gravestones up here, for example, I know not to go past this and past this. It's a very simple solution, but I think it's gonna work pretty well. I don't have that much left to do in terms of blueprint. I think I'm gonna go in and glue on the gravestones. They are a really fun and beautiful detail, and I think that I want them to shine. I want them to not feel like they're forced in to any specific area. So I'm gonna go ahead and lay those out now, I think, and just see how the board is looking. I'm gonna use some tacky glue for this. It's essentially just a PVA glue, but my understanding is the main difference between this and Elmer's glue is that it has less water in it, so it is stickier and will cure a little bit faster. There might be other differences, but I'm pretty sure that's at least the main one. I finished this one side, I think, and I'm gonna add some more to this other half over here. And we'll also see if we need any more tombstones in the future once this really starts to fill out and we see what we're working with. Okay, I'm so glad I did this phase now of putting in the gravestones. They look so good. They really fill the space and you can really see like the potential of everything now that these are in place. There's still plenty of room for other small, interesting details, but I feel like there's a good amount of space that are filled and packed with tombstones like over here and these kind of down in the ground ones. I don't know what these are called. There's gonna be a huge tree in the middle here. There's gonna be a fence around. There's enough space for the cobblestone to kind of breathe. There's plenty of space for the mausoleum, but everything, there's not so much space that it feels empty. It actually feels quite full, and I feel like I nailed it on the amount of tombstones. Actually, before I call it a day on Blueprint, I have one more thing I can do. This actually has nothing to do with the prompt, and let me show you. I've noticed that some of them are sticking up a little bit. It's honestly really not that noticeable, but this series is really in an effort to fill you in on all the tiny, teeny, tiny little steps that would otherwise end up on the cutting room floor when I'm putting together a full-length episode. This is pretty similar to the texture paste I made a couple of episodes ago. I'm gonna add baking soda. You could also use a really fine sand in lieu of sand because I don't have any. Tacky glue. I do suspect I will need to add a little bit of water because, like I said, this tacky glue actually does not have as much water as something like, say, Elmer's glue. Okay, I am gonna add a little water. Highly recommend one of these little tattoo water bottles. It looks really dirty, but that's just from my hands over the years with paint and various pastes and glues on them. This is clean water, and you can easily grab the bottle, squeeze it, water comes out. Highly recommend always having clean water at your station for things like this, so you don't have to go down or wherever your sink is. This is looking pretty good. It is extremely thick, but there's no dry bits of baking soda. See how this kind of has a little lift. rather than distort the foam, which is supposed to look like stone, I'm gonna just add a little bit of texture paste to the bottom here. I just like adding little details like this. You probably won't even notice this. But you know, they always say with like editing and VFX and stuff like that, that the less people notice your work, the better. Sometimes you don't necessarily want people to be noticing techniques and little things because you want them to be so blown away by the realism that they don't even know what it would look like without that. If no one is commenting on the visual effects, it can often be because it is so good, is no one needs to give it a second thought. People are watching your video and your edit is so tight, like there's nothing to comment on. And I think the same can go for little details like this. Is anyone gonna notice that I added this little extra bit of texture paste? Probably not. But if I hadn't added it, they might have noticed. Maybe not on the video or on social media, but if someone saw this in real life, they might have noticed that there was a little bit of lift on these tombstones in like an unrealistic way. That's kind of my point, is just, while we don't need to be perfect and sometimes good enough is good enough, like I do appreciate adding these tiny details that might end up going unnoticed. So they might not even notice the extra care I put into this, but they do know that it looks good, and that's good enough for me. Anyway. With that, I do actually think that's the last thing I'm gonna do today. So I'll see you tomorrow.